Hi, welcome, Francis. Francis Nicholas, you're VP of Strategy at eStoreBrands. And I happen to know for a fact that you didn't start your career with eStoreBrands. So why don't we start by you introducing yourself and tell us what path has taken you to eStore?
Yeah, thanks, Steve, and nice to see you today. So you're absolutely right. I started on that well-trodden path of working for a big FMCG company. In my case, it was Procter and Gamble, and I had a variety of assignments there. But probably the first one that becomes of interest for what we're going to talk about today is I was the UK e-commerce leader.
Okay.
So responsible for all of their brands being sold with the likes of Tesco and Ocado and Amazon. After that assignment, I went onto the European team and was working on the strategy and supporting the capability build as e-commerce became more important across all of P&G's markets. But then it was time for a change, and so I moved to a company called Nomad Foods, better known as the owner of the brands Birdseye, Igloo, Findus, and various others.
Hmm.
And I started off being responsible for e-commerce across the company, but over time I became the group digital director, and there I was responsible for e-commerce, digital marketing for an amount of time, and direct-to-consumer selling as well, which is quite an interesting journey, as you can imagine. So I've got plenty of
Was the
brand
Match
side
frozen food
experience.
sold direct to consumer? Was that a thing?
Yeah, we did actually pilot it, believe it or not, at the height of COVID, and you can do it, and you can actually make it profitable as well.
Very good.
Anyway, after that, it was clearly time to do something else, and I fancied a change anyway. So I thought I quite enjoyed the data. I obviously enjoy e-commerce, digital commerce, a lot of people call it these days. So I thought, let me go and see what I can do in a different space. Still sitting around the same table, but sitting in a different chair. And I ended up with eStore Brands, and we're on the VP of Strategy. And it's quite exciting doing what we do because I'm still dealing with brands every day, but obviously coming at it from a different angle. So instead of taking the data and insights and applying it, I'm working with our clients to understand, what are we able to create or
Okay.
provide for them, but also to understand what they would like in the future, and then try and figure out if that's possible or not. So yeah, continue to be in the digital commerce space, and it's a very interesting space as well.
I'm sure it is. And I guess my limited understanding would be that the core proposition of eStore brands is aimed at FMCG companies. But I know that you've had some interesting developments which we'll come on to. But why don't you tell us about your core proposition and why it's attractive to I guess CPG companies mostly.
Well, interesting actually that. Well, we'll just face straight into that in terms of the client base. Actually, we have quite a lot of clients in lots of other verticals, such as pharma and toys and electricals. So yes, we have CPG, FMCG, but what we do actually travels into lots of other verticals. But the core proposition is digital shelf analytics. So looking at in a lot of detail, how does the brand show up on the retailer's website? How does the category show up? And we look at all sorts of metrics such as ratings and review sentiment, positioning, retailer taxonomy, a lot of detail on search results, product content, an assortment, so distribution and out of stocks. So our core business has been, has been going for more than 10 years, is, looking at how those online sales fundamentals look at scale across multiple retailers, multiple markets. So I think our biggest client has, I think, 250 retailers across about 60 markets that we scrape for on a daily basis.
That's really interesting. So, what's the source of that data, and how do you obtain the data from all of those retailers?
Yeah, so we do everything in house in our business. A lot of competitors, buy in portions of the data, but we've chosen for QA reasons and responsiveness to have our arms around the whole end-to-end supply chain. So we do all of the scraping in house. We develop the parsers. We work as retailers change how they're set up to scrape that data day in day out, and then serve it up through dashboards and APIs for the more sophisticated retailers who want it. Brands who want the data delivered straight into their own dashboards internally alongside other data feeds. So they can see on a day-to-day basis. So we've got this one slide in one of our decks that famously says, get in the morning, have a coffee, and look at what your actions for today are.
Very interesting. Okay, and then you were telling me though that recently you've developed a new proposition that is much more kind of retailer centric, and I guess fits with those retailers for whom, and this is certainly a big and growing number, data monetization is a thing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So having my brand background and coming into the space, it became clear that there was a missed opportunity, and that was it was great to get scraping data, which is very sophisticated and and graph up lots of great things, and you can see how you're performing trends wise, but you were missing absolute numbers, which on the face of it isn't a big deal. But actually, when you start looking at the sizes of people's online businesses, it starts to become a big deal because you have to infer trends when you don't have the actual data. So I soon realised that having actual retailer data would be a bit of a game changer. So we created our eStore retail concept, and we started, talking to retailers about, would there be interest to, to create a solution which has a multitude of benefits, which I'm sure we can get into in a minute. In terms of, at one end it's monetizable, so there's a revenue stream for the retailer. But actually, if you get it right, by sharing more data with the brands, then they're able to have much more informed conversations with you, and get straight to a focus on implementing actions rather than haggling about the data source. My data says this, your data says that. So yeah, we've launched a C-Store retail in market. We've got various retailers cooking, but the first public domain manifestation of that is Asda Experts. So obviously Asda, and we're we're working in conjunction with Asda, and we can get into the model in a minute, in terms of providing access to their data, and we'll explain the types of data in a minute. But crucially, via our collaboration manager resource and our proven playbook, helping the brands that sign up get the insights out of the data fast and get actions implemented, which then can provide value to the brand to deliver an ROI for them, but crucially also for Asda to help them grow their category.
So that's really interesting. So if we think about the world of kind of retailer data monetization, then I guess as far back as when you and I started our careers, and we won't embarrass ourselves by reminding the audience when that was, EPOS data monetization via companies like Nielsen, IRI as was, Circana now, was always a thing, and most brands would have subscribed to one or other of those services. And then we saw the advent of kind of Retail Link, I think, which was the Walmart tool, and Tesco Link and others, where retailers would disseminate, sometimes for free, sometimes they would charge, depending on the granularity, their EPOS sales data. And then as it evolved, and personally I was very, very involved in the development and the launch of the monetization of customer data, which I guess it was Tesco who were the pioneer with the introduction of the dunnhumby shop, and I think that tool is still going and evolving and well used after 20, probably 25 years. And most retailers now, most developed FMCG-esque retailers, the supermarkets especially, have some kind of similar customer monetization tool. So against that background, Francis, where's your value add? What are you bringing to the table that wouldn't typically be covered by that suite of tools that most retailers have these days?
Yeah, so the immediate response to that would be two-pronged. First of all, the specific data that's being provided, and we can get into that in a minute. But crucially, the second point is the focus on execution. So don't think of what we're doing as another data platform, granted with some data you can't get anywhere else. Think of it as an execution platform where, via a proven playbook, etc., and hardwire into, as does teams and in cases systems, where at their sole discretion they're happy with things being implemented, we can make it happen, and we can make it happen fast. So in terms,
clarification, sorry, before you come in, I'm really interested to hear what you're going to say. I didn't mean to interrupt, but and there may well be a clue in the name, but are we presupposing that you're talking about e-com data, or not necessarily?
Yeah, sorry if that wasn't clear. So the current manifestations we have, and certainly the Asda Expert example, is purely focused on the online channel. But in my early days, online was a rounding error, but it's not now. For many brands, it might be 20-25% of their UK business. So it's an absolutely critical part of their channel strategy to win in e-commerce.
And still presumably the fastest growing?
Absolutely. For the last years, I mean, look at the crazy numbers during COVID. That was a great way of driving trial and adoption when we were all stuck at home. But whilst there was a bit of a drop off immediately post-COVID, if you look last year, we look at the forecast for the next years, online continues to be the fastest growing channel in many markets.
Interesting. So, okay, so we're honing in, I guess, on the online channel, as you say, 20-25% of many companies' businesses, the fastest growing channel. So what is it then? What are the types of information that you're able to, distribute, synthesize, analyze? What is it that's innovative about what you've developed?
So obviously, and what we've done is in close collaboration with Asda, so it's very much based on what they've been prepared to share with the brands. But to give you an example of the types of data feeds we have, we've got the online sales data in as much, if not more, granularity than to other sort of sales offerings. But where it becomes unique and different is, first of all, search terms. So there aren't many retailers who are open and prepared to share you all of the search terms that shoppers use in their site. So if I said to you there were, I don't actually know the exact number off the top of my head, but I wouldn't be surprised if there were 1,000 search terms used in the laundry category. So Asda will tell you number 1, number 2, but also down to number 999 and number 1,000. And they will tell you by day what's going on, what's changing, what are the drivers, what are the drainers. So given that search is one of the most important touch points in any retailer these days to add products to the basket, you can imagine that's a big opportunity area for brands to to optimize their presence and help Asda work on great visibility and maximize what shoppers seeing based on what they're looking for. So that's a good example of something that's unique. Another example is traffic and conversion data.
I'm sure many people know this, but just for clarification. So from memory, about 60% of all online shopping journeys are search-led. In other words, the customer is typing into the retailer's search bar what it is they're looking for. So, I probably would type in washing powder, but, you're going to tell me that there's 999 other ways of searching for that within that category. And the alternative would be to somehow navigate category by subcategory all the way through the retailer's site, which increasingly most people don't do. So I could see now that that's going to be very, very useful for those brands that want to understand what is it that people are looking for, and then presumably you're able to tell them what then happens after a customer types in that particular search term. But can you also give us some insights around what are those other search terms? What sort of stuff are people putting into search bars?
Yeah, again, without having prepared for this question, I can't remember the exact number, but the typos. So we capture all the typos.
Okay.
So chocolate, I think there's about 50 different variations on the word chocolate, starting from say CHO, all the way through to all sorts of different permutations with incorrect spellings and what have you. And some of the most frequently typed in typos actually have quite a lot of traffic. So when you start adding up the perfectly spelt word chocolate with all of the different, the next 5 most trafficked misspellings, actually that can become quite a meaningful amount of traffic. So what we do with Asda in this case is we work with them to highlight, what shoppers are seeing when they're typing in these misspellings, and we make them the brands working in conjunction with eStore make recommendations to Asda for how they might want to change what products are tagged. So as an example, it could, and we've got examples of this, you might have a bestseller in a category that is just not being set up for whatever reason against some of the top search terms. Maybe the correct spelled chocolate, but not the next 5 variants. And by demonstrating that to Asda and demonstrating that these are bestsellers, they may choose to, at their sole discretion, tag that product against those search terms. And we've got various case studies now that demonstrate that they've been prepared to do that, and everybody's been a winner because the fast mover is now becoming more visible, which is giving the brand a benefit, but crucially it's helping give a positive impact to the category as well.
That's really, really interesting, and it was the introduction of sponsored product ads that was kind of pioneered by Amazon, I guess about 5 or 6 years ago, that has led to this explosion in the last, since then in retail media, and the explosion has really been led by this introduction of sponsored product ads, which are the ads that appear when a search term is entered. So I'm, putting 2 and 2 together. So I'm assuming that you must be able to give some very interesting insights back to brands and the retailers themselves, presumably, on the interrelation between the search term, the retail media execution, and what subsequently happened in terms of customer and consumer behaviour. Is that right?
Absolutely. So we've got multiple modules and data feeds that can inform the answer here. So if we go to another area called traffic and conversion, based on the data that Asda have been prepared to share, we can see the traffic and the conversion rates of individual SKUs by day. So you can imagine pre, during and post analysis of sponsored search investments can be very, very exacting in a good way. So you can map what's the performance in the category, what are the SKUs that have high conversion rates but maybe need a bit of a boost. Yes, you can do organic levers, but they tend to take a bit of time, whereas you might choose to invest some sponsored money to get them moving fast. And you can literally, do that and almost course correct as you see the results coming in. So if you've got we tend to update the data weekly at the moment, although we could do it more frequently. So you can run one campaign, do the first week of the campaign, and the following Monday you can check everything and analyse it. And if you believe you're off track or you see that you should be going in a slightly different direction, then you've got that that gift of understanding what's just happened, but also the ability to course correct there and then.
No, that's very, very interesting. I imagine also then you can provide insights into not just obviously the sponsored products, but display ads and other media types that retailers increasingly have. And then it sounds a little bit also that I guess where there's a store pick model for e-com, which is, I think I'm right in saying, Ocado to one side, more or less everyone, that really understanding what's going on in individual stores to impact availability must also be a key thing. So you've kind of got the unique ability really to understand what's happening on the retailer's site linked to highly granular sales availability data at a store pick level. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we've got some good case studies here as well. So we can, at the moment, we're able to share fulfillment rates, subs rates, and nil picks rates by SKU, by store, by day. So that's quite a big data set, as you can imagine. But the benefit of that is it means you can see what's going on, you can see the trends, you can identify the regions, the stores, the SKUs that have the biggest ongoing issues, and then you can try and do something about it. And when it comes to fixes, there's a few things that we've done already, with Asda. We've worked with their central supply chain teams to look at stock holdings on individual SKUs, literally down to individual stores, believe it or not, and they might have made a fix where there's an obvious opportunity. All the way through to, we've got several clients who provide this data to their field sales forces. So again, from their angle, when they're in the physical store, they can go and talk to the store manager or department manager about, right, we've got an ongoing issue with this sort of sub-brand. What can you do? What can we do to help each other to try and move on? And then when they go to the next call a month later, they can share what the impact was of the intervention. So yeah, we've got multiple stakeholders using this data in the most really engaged manufacturers. It's not just the e-commerce team, absolutely not.
That's really interesting. I mean, it sounds quite collaborative, and it's making me think about the business model, because presumably, the supermarkets aren't going to do this. They're not doing this for free.
No.
What's the business model? Does a supplier simply subscribe, or where does the collaborative element come in? How does that work?
So yes, the brand subscribes, and we've got a commercial arrangement with Asda that works for everybody. But essentially, what they're subscribing to is not just some data in a platform. That's what we started with, to be honest, and then we soon realised that's almost the lesser part of it. The bigger part of it is the aligned playbook that we have with Asda of the levers that they're prepared to offer to suppliers to pull, but then crucially, the process that we have in place to work with the brands in the early days to understand those levers, so they can, once they've figured out what the insights are, make some good recommendations. But crucially, we've got like a weekly process in place with Asda where we go through all the suggestions from the brands, and we triage them, and they make their sole discretion decision, and if it's a yes, then we work with them as needed to help implement the action, or go back to the brand if they've said it no. Although what I would say is the strike rate of Asda accepting the recommendations is very high, because ultimately all the recommendations are grounded in their own data and insight. So most of the time, Asda will try to make the activations happen. Now, they don't always work, but most of the time they do.
I mean, it sounds as though you've built something very innovative there. Are you getting good take-up?
Yeah, we've got multitude of brands. In the public domain, you'll see that we spoke with Unilever at the Connected Commerce Summit last October. 2 weeks ago, I spoke with Kellanova at the Shopper and Category Insights Summit, and very shortly I'll be talking with Arla about this at the Digital FMCG Summit. So I think you've got some big names there who are very happy to share some thoughts.
That's very good. So presumably it's now a case of one supermarket down, more to go, or how do you see the future unfolding?
Yeah, look, so in terms of the supermarket vertical, I can confirm we have a second retailer we'll be launching with later in the year. I'm not allowed to say who it is, but it's happening. But having been in the e-commerce space for a long time, personally I have worked on Electro when I was P&G. There's nothing that stops us taking this into other verticals that have got similar opportunities, whether it's Electro, whether it's DIY, whether it's beauty care. Having seen it in action, having seen the value it can deliver for the brands by giving them more of an understanding and helping them strengthen their hypotheses and their studies from other data sources or focus groups, what have you, and then seeing them gel that all together and take it to Asda to make it a more compelling proposition. It's obvious, and the best thing is when you sit in review meetings, you see the impact it's delivering for clients, but crucially also for the retailer. And I think that the majority of our clients, that they've all had positive ROIs. Several of them have, if I think on an annualized sales benefits metric, several of them have six-figure and big six figures as well in terms of the benefit they've already unlocked from the solution after the first month. So, and even with those that have already got, 25 sets of actions away with a multi-six-figure benefit, we still see lots of runway for more. So, and they do as well, which is why it's so exciting.
Now, I could imagine you've got a lot of tailwinds. I mean, we've got the growth of e-com, we've got the explosion of retail media linked especially to search, which then requires an understanding of the interplay, juxtaposition of those things. What is it that customers are searching for? What then happens as a consequence of the search? How am I as a brand impacted by that or not? And yeah, it's and then I think there's an increasing trend from retailers to make more and more data available. They're not doing that just for the fun of it, but as a important income stream, but also as a collaborative business driver. So yeah, it would feel to me that you're in a very good place, and you've clearly built something pioneering and innovative. Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, thank you.
Brilliant. Well, maybe so you come back in 6 months' time, tell us how you're getting on.
We'd be absolutely delighted to.
Francis, from eStoreBrands, many thanks indeed.
Thanks very much, Steve.
Yeah.
Talk again soon.
Bye for now.